I always thought the little things would keep our marriage strong. Small gestures, gentle touches, inside jokes, these were our foundation. But I learned the hard way that little things can also unravel everything. A faint, unfamiliar scent on her clothes, a late meeting that ran too long, a forced smile that didn't reach her eyes, subtle signs I nearly missed. Looking back, those details were neon warning signs blinking in the periphery of my happy life. It was a crisp October evening in North Carolina. I remember because the oak in our front yard had just turned a fiery red, leaves crunching under my feet as I walked to the door. "Jess, I'm home," I called out, shrugging off my coat. Usually my wife Jessica would appear in moments, greeting me with a kiss. That night, only silence answered. Finally, she emerged from the kitchen, drying a plate as if she'd been doing dishes. Her hair was damp. "Did you just shower?" I asked, bemused. It wasn't like her to shower right before I got home. We often went jogging together later in the evening. Jessica froze for a split second, barely perceptible, then continued toweling the plate. "Oh yeah," she said lightly. "I spilled some soup on myself while cooking and it was all in my hair. Had to rinse off." "How was work?" Her explanation made sense, mostly, but something about the way she avoided my gaze tightened a knot in my stomach. I stepped closer and caught a whiff of her shampoo, a new jasmine scent. "You switched shampoos?" I asked, trying to keep my tone casual. She laughed, but it sounded a touch high-pitched. "You noticed everything, Daniel. The store was out of my usual, so I grabbed whatever this is." She tossed the towel onto the counter. "Smells nice, right?" "It does," I said, forcing a smile. I leaned in for the customary hello kiss. She pecked me on the lips and quickly turned away, fussing with utensils that didn't need arranging. The kiss was cold, distracted. Another small detail that set my nerves buzzing. That night at dinner, Jessica was unusually quiet. We ate the chicken stew she'd made, and I recounted an amusing story from the office about my coworker mixing up email recipients, normally the kind of anecdote that would make her throw her head back in laughter. Instead, she just gave a thin chuckle and pushed peas around her plate. "You sure everything's okay?" I ventured. "You seem tired." She startled slightly. "Oh, sorry, yeah, just a headache." She rubbed her temple as if on cue. "Work's been a nightmare prepping for this big client presentation. I think I'm just stressed." I reached across the table to squeeze her hand. "I get it. Anything I can do?" She offered me a weak smile. "No, but thank you. Maybe I'll turn in early tonight." I nodded, but inside, unease churned. Jessica had always been an open book, animated, affectionate, incapable of hiding when something was on her mind. Yet here she was, locking herself behind monosyllables and feigned exhaustion. If it was just stress, why did it feel like she was pulling away from me? We cleaned up the dishes together. Usually, we'd sway around the kitchen to soft music, turning cleanup into a mini-date. Not tonight. She kept distance between us, humming under her breath and flinching slightly whenever I came too near, as if afraid I might touch her. It stung. I walked her upstairs. She paused at the bedroom door. "I think I'll sleep early if you don't mind. You can watch TV without me." I studied her face, her eyes. Those hazel eyes that usually met mine with warmth flickered away quickly. "Sure, I'll be down in a bit," I replied softly. She vanished into our bedroom, shutting the door gently. I stood in the hallway for a long moment, mind racing through the puzzle pieces of the evening. Damp hair, new shampoo, a strained smile, distance, each on its own, easily explained. Together, they formed a picture I didn't want to see. I headed downstairs to the living room, but the TV remained off. Instead, I sank onto the couch in the dark. Was I being paranoid? After 8 years of marriage, couples change routines. Stress can do that. And she had a big client pitch coming up at her marketing firm. She'd talked about it for weeks. Perhaps I was projecting my own anxieties. My software company had announced looming layoffs. I hadn't told Jess yet, not wanting to worry her. We both had pressures. I rubbed my face, telling myself to drop it. Yet an insistent voice in my head refused to be silenced. Something's wrong. That night I barely slept. Jessica claimed to fall asleep immediately, turned away from me on her side of the bed. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling fan slowly spinning, listening to her soft breaths. We normally cuddled before drifting off, her head on my chest. But she had mumbled about her headache and kept to her edge, a gulf between us in the king-size bed. I could not reach her, in more ways than one. In the early hours, I drifted into a fitful sleep. I dreamt that I was grasping at Jessica's hand as she dangled off a cliff, her fingers slipping through mine. She kept saying, "Let me go," with a sad smile. I jolted awake at dawn, heart pounding. It was just a dream, but I awoke with a heavy certainty that I was losing her. I rose quietly, careful not to disturb her, and went downstairs. In the kitchen, I brewed coffee and tried to marshal my thoughts. If something was truly wrong, the worst possibilities were infidelity or illness. She'd seen what serious illness looked like when her mother battled cancer years ago. If Jess were sick, she would tell me, right? We'd have no secrets in a crisis, and her behavior felt more like guilt than sickness. My hands trembled as I poured coffee into my mug. I scalded my tongue on the first sip, cursing under my breath. I didn't want to leap to conclusions. Accusing your spouse of cheating is a bell you can't unring. But the alternative was doing nothing, and that was unbearable. I needed to know the truth one way or another. Leaning on the counter, I took a deep breath and acknowledged to myself what I had been avoiding. I suspected my wife was having an affair. The thought alone made my gut twist painfully, but in a strange way, admitting it steadied me. If it were true, I had to find out. And if I was wrong, I'd gladly be proven a fool and never doubt her again. I made up my mind to watch more closely. No snooping through her phone or reading emails. That felt too much like a violation of trust. And if I was wrong, it could hurt us. Instead, I'd pay attention and gather clues the old-fashioned way. Jessica wasn't going to just confess if something was going on. I'd need to be patient and clever. As I rinsed out my mug, I noticed a crumpled receipt tossed next to the toaster. Probably something Jess left from yesterday. On instinct, I smoothed it out. It was from a bistro downtown, dated yesterday at lunchtime. 2 prime rib sandwiches, 2 iced teas. $45. She hadn't mentioned going out for lunch. In fact, when I'd texted her around noon, asking how her day was, she replied she just grabbed a salad from the break room fridge. My jaw tightened. Little things, I thought, heart sinking. I slipped the receipt into my pocket just as I heard her footsteps upstairs. A moment later, Jessica descended, dressed in her usual work attire, a cream blouse and tailored navy slacks, with her laptop bag slung over her shoulder. She looked composed and lovely as ever, hair swept up professionally, makeup subtle. If I hadn't known her so well, I'd never guessed she'd been distant the night before. "Morning," she greeted, a touch too brightly. "You're up early." "Couldn't sleep," I replied, forcing a yawn. "I made coffee." "Thanks." She poured herself a cup. I noticed she didn't kiss me good morning. Another deviation from our norm. She blew on her coffee. Perfect. We stood there, a few feet apart, an awkwardness in the air that never used to be there. Confront her now? I wondered. No, my gut said to hold off. If I was direct without proof, she might just deny, and then hide things better. I needed to be sure. "You have that big client presentation today, right?" I asked evenly. She sipped, nodding. "This afternoon. I'll probably be home a bit late, maybe 8 or 9. The team might go out to dinner after to decompress." She said it casually, but I caught how she watched my reaction over the rim of her mug. "That makes sense," I replied, keeping my voice neutral. Inside, suspicion flared. An after-work dinner, too. Was that true, or groundwork for another lie? "Well, good luck. You'll knock their socks off." "Thanks, hun." She gave me a quick, distracted peck on the cheek. "I should run. I want to get in early and prep a bit more." "Of course." I opened the front door for her. The morning sun bathed our quiet suburban street in golden light. Jessica paused, looking at me as if she wanted to say something. Her lips parted, then she simply smiled tightly. "Love you," she said, stepping out to her car. "Love you too," I answered, but she had already turned away. I watched as she drove off, wondering if she'd meant it. Standing alone in the doorway, I made a decision. If she wouldn't tell me what was wrong, I'd have to find out myself. My heart ached at the thought of what I might uncover, but a steadier part of me, one I barely recognized, was already hardening with resolve. I locked the door and returned inside to plan my next steps. Little did I know, This morning would mark the beginning of a journey that would transform me from a confused, wounded husband into something else entirely. If Jessica truly was betraying me, I wasn't just going to confront her. I was going to make sure she and whoever her lover was paid for shattering our life. At that moment, all I knew was that I needed answers. The extent of my response, the ruthlessness I'd soon discover within myself, was still dormant. But as I slipped the receipt from my pocket and stared at the proof of her lie, a quiet fury sparked. A fuse had been lit. Chapter 2. Discovery. Wednesday arrived with a tense chill in the air. For the next 2 days after my suspicion first took root, I played the attentive but oblivious husband, all the while keenly observing. Each evening brought new discrepancies. On Tuesday, Jessica claimed she had to stay late to finish a project. When she finally came home, it was nearly 10 p.m. I had prepared a late supper, her favorite mushroom risotto, to surprise her, but when she walked in, she barely touched the meal. "Sorry, grabbed a bite at the office," she said, pushing rice around the plate. Yet I noticed a smudge of red wine on her blouse cuff. Her company's break room doesn't stock wine. Wednesday, she dressed up a notch more than usual, a slim black dress that hugged her figure and heels a little higher than her norm. "Feeling fancy for the client pitch?" I teased, masking my anxiety. She shrugged lightly. "Presentation's a big deal, we need to impress." She kissed me goodbye, that same fleeting ghost of a kiss that had replaced our once passionate farewells. The hollow feeling in my chest deepened as I watched her stride out in those heels, confident and collected. If she was seeing someone, she certainly was putting an effort to look the part. I worked from home that day under the pretense of catching up on code reviews, but mostly my mind was elsewhere. The receipt from the bistro, the late nights, the dress to impress outfit. I had straws, but I needed the whole haystack. Hard evidence, something undeniable. My thoughts turned to how I might catch her. Text messages or emails could hold clues, but I'd promised myself I wouldn't snoop electronically. It felt wrong, and conveniently she had a passcode on her phone I didn't know. That was another red flag. We'd always been open with phone codes until recently when she changed hers for work security. If not her phone, then perhaps her schedule. I knew Jessica kept a personal planner, an old-school, leather-bound calendar in her home office. She liked to jot work meetings and appointments in it, even though she also used Google Calendar. She once explained writing it down helped her remember. Maybe I could glean something from that. I waited until late morning when I was sure she'd be out of any routine check-in call. Then, heart pounding at my own sneaking behavior, I crept into her small office next to our bedroom. The planner sat neatly on her desk. Everything in Jess's workspace was meticulously arranged, testament to her organized mind. I flipped to October. Her neat handwriting filled the boxes. Work meetings, project deadlines, dinner with S last Thursday. S, probably her friend Sarah. She meets monthly. Jew, my mom's birthday reminder. And on tomorrow's date, Friday, a cryptic note. 7 p.m. tea at La Piazza. La Piazza was an upscale Italian restaurant downtown. And tea? My pulse quickened. I racked my brain. Did she have a colleague or client with an initial T? None that I knew of. La Piazza also wasn't the kind of place her office would choose for a casual team dinner. It was intimate, dimly lit, and known as a date spot. My hands trembled slightly as I carefully returned the planner to exactly how it was and backed out of the office. So she had plans tomorrow evening at La Piazza with someone initialed T. Someone I wasn't supposed to know about, clearly, since she'd vaguely told me she might see friends this weekend, but no specifics. Replacing one worry with a plan, I exhaled slowly. Tomorrow at 7, I would be at La Piazza to see for myself who T was. I dreaded what I might witness, but it had to be done. For the rest of the day, I tried to stay productive. I even joined a conference call for work, though I remembered none of it later. By late afternoon, anxiety and anticipation had tied knots in my stomach. I had to confide in someone or I'd explode. I grabbed my phone and texted my closest friend, Mark. "You free to grab a beer tonight? Need to talk." Mark responded quickly. "Sure, buddy. O'Malley's at 6? Perfect. O'Malley's pub was our regular watering hole, a short drive away. I hadn't told Mark anything yet, partly out of embarrassment that I might be overreacting. But now I had enough suspicious breadcrumbs that I needed a second opinion from someone I trusted with my life. Jessica came home early that evening, around 5, surprising me. I was getting ready to head out, shrugging on a jacket in the foyer. She stepped through the door, looking tired but still polished. "You're home early," I said, trying to sound casual despite being caught off guard. She gave a thin smile. "Presentation finished ahead of schedule. Went well, I think." She set her bag down. "I heading somewhere?" "Yeah, Mark wanted to meet for a quick beer. I figured I could use a break." I tried to keep my tone light. "You okay with leftovers for dinner? There's plenty of risotto from the other night." To my surprise, she nodded readily. "That's fine. I might just eat later. Not very hungry right now." She looked relieved that I was going out, almost as if my absence was convenient. "All right, I won't be long," I said, opening the door. On impulse, I leaned in and gave her a kiss on the forehead. She stiffened slightly, then patted my arm. The gesture felt oddly consoling, like I was a coworker or friend, not her husband. I managed a tight smile and left before I could betray the hurt creeping into my expression. As I drove to O'Malley's, I tried to calm the whirlwind in my mind. Perhaps I was seeing ghosts. Maybe T could be a girlfriend like Tina or Teresa, though none came to mind. And La Piazza could be just a new favorite spot of a friend. But deep down, I suspected I was grasping at straws. Each lie she told had been small, but together they painted a damning picture. O'Malley's was moderately busy, the after-work crowd nursing beers and watching a muted baseball game on the bar TV. I spotted Mark at a high-top table in the corner, a pint already in front of him and another across from it. For me, presumably. He raised a hand in greeting. Mark and I had been friends since college. We roomed together sophomore year. He was the best man at my wedding. A burly guy with a constant 5 o'clock shadow and an easy grin. He was also refreshingly blunt. If I was overthinking things, he'd tell me straight. "Hey man," he said as I sat down. "IPA for you. Figured you'd need something strong. You sounded serious in your text." His jovial expression faded as he got a closer look at me. "Whoa, Dan, you look like hell. What's going on?" I took a long sip of beer, gathering courage. "I think something's up with Jess." My voice came out strained. I hadn't spoken the words aloud until now, and it made it real. Mark's brow furrowed with concern. "Up how? Is she okay?" I let out a hollow laugh. "I don't know. She's been distant, secretive. I think she might be having an affair." Mark inhaled sharply, eyes widening. "Jesus, seriously?" I braced myself for skepticism or a quick dismissal that I was crazy. Instead, Mark's expression settled into a grim one. "Tell me everything. What have you noticed?" In a low tone, I recounted the past week's observations. The late nights, the lies about lunch and dinner, the odd behaviors, the receipt, the planner note for tomorrow. Speaking it to Mark, listing each piece, I felt both sick and vindicated. Sick that this was my life, vindicated that I wasn't imagining things. He listened without interrupting, jaw clenched. When I finished, he muttered a curse. "That doesn't sound good, Dan. I've known Jess a long time and she's never struck me as the cheating type, but..." "People change," he shook his head in disbelief. "Have you thought about any other explanation?" "Believe me, I have," I sighed, rubbing my temples. "I thought maybe she's depressed or going through something she hasn't told me, but then why the lies? The secret dinner plans? It feels like she's deliberately hiding something or someone." Mark drummed his fingers on the table thoughtfully. "You plan to confront her?" I took another swig of IPA. "Not yet. I plan to catch her in the act if possible. Tomorrow, I'm going to La Piazza, stake it out. I want to see who this T is with my own eyes." His lips set in a firm line. "I don't like that you have to do this, but I get it. You need proof. Want me to come with?" I looked up, surprised by the offer. Before I could answer, he continued. "I can hang back, different table. If things go south, I'll be there. Plus 2 pairs of eyes are better than 1. Maybe I'll catch something you miss." Relief and gratitude flooded me. "Thanks, Mark. I could use the backup." I hadn't realized how much tension I carried until that moment. The thought of confronting this alone was terrifying. Having a friend by my side, even in the shadows, made it feel slightly less impossible. We stayed for another round, discussing contingencies. The plan was simple. I'd go to La Piazza ahead of 7 p.m., find a discreet spot. Mark would come separately and observe from a distance. We'd not appear to know each other. If Jessica showed up with some man, I'd watch and gather evidence. Maybe snap a photo with my phone. Then, depending on how things unfolded, I could either confront them there or save the confrontation for later, after I had processed it. Don't go charging in there throwing punches or anything, Mark warned, eyeing me. I know you're angry, but keep cool. Document first. You might need that evidence. I nodded. I will. I wasn't typically the violent type, but imagining my wife in another man's arms ignited flashes of rage I'd never felt. I took a deep breath. Honestly, I hope I'm wrong, and I end up looking like an idiot. Mark gave me a sad smile. Me too. But if you're right, she's the idiot, and she'll have hell to pay. His words came out harsher than I'd ever heard him speak about Jessica. He'd been close with both of us. Jess considered him a friend too. But Mark's loyalty was firmly with me, and I was silently thankful for that. By the time I left the pub, it was nearing 8. The sun had set and the autumn night carried a chill. I sat in my car for the moment, steeling myself to return home as if everything was normal. Tomorrow, I told myself, just get through tonight and tomorrow you'll know. When I stepped into the house, lights were dim. Jess? I called softly. No answer. I found her curled up on the living room couch, asleep, a throw blanket over her. The TV was on low, playing an old sitcom rerun. She looked peaceful, face relaxed in slumber. In that moment, she was my wife again, the one who fell asleep on my shoulder during movie nights, the one who left half-finished mugs of tea on the coffee table. My heart twisted painfully. Part of me wanted to wake her, hold her, demand the truth right then and there, and maybe just maybe she'd say, "I'm sorry," and we'd cry and fix this, but I couldn't. If I was wrong, waking her to accuse her would damage us. If I was right, this was the last quiet moment before the storm, and some masochistic part of me wanted to preserve it. I gently lifted her legs and sat on the couch, then settled her feet in my lap. She stirred. "Dan?" she mumbled, half awake. "Shh, it's just me," I whispered. "I'm back. You fell asleep out here." She blinked groggily and sat up, the blanket falling away. "Oh, I was watching TV. Must have dozed off." "No worries." I stroked her ankle absent-mindedly. "Long day, huh?" "Yeah," she sighed, then leaned over and, to my surprise, rested her head against my shoulder. It was a familiar gesture, something she'd always do when she was very tired or a little apologetic. "I'm sorry I've been so busy lately," she said softly. I froze, unsure how to respond. Was this guilt speaking, or just normal life stress? "I know the feeling," I said lightly, neither confirming nor denying a problem. We sat there for a quiet minute. It felt so normal that I could almost pretend everything was all right. Almost. I inhaled the scent of her hair. Yes, jasmine shampoo, reminding me of last night's mystery. I glanced down and noticed she was still wearing her work clothes, though she'd kicked off her heels. The top few buttons of her blouse were undone, revealing the delicate gold necklace I'd given her on our 5th anniversary. For some reason, that sight made my throat tight. I remembered clasping that necklace around her neck, how she'd kissed me and said she'd never take it off. She still wore it every day. Did that mean something? Could someone wearing her husband's gift truly be cheating? I wanted so badly to believe she was faithful that my mind reached for any sign. But a necklace is just a necklace. It can't absolve her of lies. "You're quiet," Jessica murmured, breaking my reverie. She tilted her head to look at me, eyes searching. "Is everything okay? You've seemed a bit distant, too, the past couple days." The irony almost made me laugh. "I'm distant," I wanted to say. Instead, I gently countered, "I was about to ask you the same. We both have been preoccupied, I guess." She averted her gaze first, lowering it to my chest. "I know. I'm sorry. After this week, things should calm down." A bold question popped into my head. Perhaps I could throw a line out, see if she'd bite. "So, tomorrow, any plans after work? It's Friday. We could go see that movie you wanted." Her body tensed against me for a fraction of a second. Then she sat up, stretching casually. "Oh, tomorrow. I actually made plans to catch up with an old friend. You remember Tina from college? She's in town just for the night. My heart plummeted. So it was Tina now. At least she had a ready name for the tea. Was she telling the truth? If I hadn't snooped, I might accept that easily. But La Piazza was a romantic locale for a couple of college girlfriends to catch up, and Jessica rarely hung out with Tina one-on-one. They were more casual friends. This felt like a well-crafted lie, a dash of truth, Tina did exist, to mask a bigger deception. I kept my face neutral. Tina? Wow, haven't heard about her in ages, that's cool. Maybe I could join you two for a drink, say hi? I ventured, testing. Immediately, her expression closed off. Oh, it's really been forever since we talked. We were just going to do a girls' night, you know? I wouldn't want you to be bored listening to our old stories. She managed a small laugh that sounded false to my ears. I nodded slowly. I understand. You girls have fun. She visibly exhaled, relieved at my lack of resistance. Thanks, Dan. I promise I'll be home before it's too late. I forced a smile. Sure. I glanced at the TV. A commercial flickered on about a tropical vacation. My mind was already racing ahead to tomorrow night, formulating and refining the plan with this new information. If she believed I bought her story, she'd be less guarded. Let's head up to bed, I said after a minute, clicking off the TV. You're exhausted. She agreed, and we went upstairs. For the first time in a while, she actually curled into me as we lay down. It was almost painful, feeling her warmth against me, her arm draped over my chest as if nothing was wrong. I stayed still, staring into the darkness, listening to her breathe until it evened out in sleep. I lay awake far longer, mind churning. Tomorrow could change everything. One way or another, I'd get my truth. The thought terrified and emboldened me in equal measure. I knew that in uncovering this truth, I might well destroy the life I knew, but that life already felt like a lie. As night deepened, I finally drifted off with a resolve crystallizing in my heart. If my worst fears proved true, I would not be a passive, heartbroken victim. I would channel every ounce of pain into something decisive. Cheating, betrayal, these were things I never thought would touch my marriage. If they had, then I would make sure there were consequences. Perhaps I wasn't yet sure what those would be, but a part of me, a part I barely recognized, was already preparing for battle. Tomorrow would be the end of ignorance and possibly the beginning of a very different me. Chapter 3. The Unveiling. Friday crawled by with excruciating slowness. I went through the motions at work, but my concentration was non-existent. Around midday, I emailed my boss saying I needed the afternoon off for a personal matter. A half-day's vacation, technically true, since nothing I did from noon onward was related to my job as a software project manager. Instead, I transformed into a different kind of manager, a project manager of my own domestic espionage. By 5 p.m., I was at home, pretending to wind down for the day as usual. Jessica wasn't back yet. She'd said she might go straight to meet Tina. I texted her casually, "Hope you're having a good day. Any idea what time you'll meet Tina?" She replied within minutes, "Probably 7 at La Piazza. Might grab a cocktail first around 6:30 at the bar there. Don't wait up for dinner." The inclusion of the restaurant name, La Piazza, as if volunteering it freely, almost disarmed me. If she were lying, that was bold, but perhaps she felt confident in her cover. Or maybe, a whisper of hope said, maybe she actually was meeting Tina and I've spun myself up for nothing. I latched onto that slim possibility to steady my nerves. I typed back, "Okay, have fun, love you." Her response? A heart emoji. I stared at that little red heart on my phone screen until it blurred. Was that guilt? Routine affection? Did she even mean it anymore? I set the phone down, jaw tightening. Enough? Soon I'd have clarity. Mark had texted me that he'd be at a cafe near La Piazza by 6, just to be in position. We synchronized our watches like we were about to execute a sting operation. In a sense, we were. At 6:15, I parked my car a block away from the restaurant. It was dusk, the sky still aglow with orange traces on the horizon. La Piazza sat on a charming tree-lined street of downtown Charlotte, its front a warm Tuscan yellow with climbing ivy and a discreet sign, It was the kind of place Jess and I would go for anniversaries or special date nights. My chest constricted at the thought that she might be using our spot to rendezvous with someone else. I walked slowly toward the restaurant, heart hammering. I wore a charcoal baseball cap pulled low and a brown jacket I rarely used, trying for a casual, slightly disguised look. The last thing I wanted was her spotting me prematurely. At 6:25, I slipped into a boutique hotel lobby directly across from La Piazza to scout. The lobby had a second-story mezzanine that overlooked the street. Through the broad windows, I had a perfect view of La Piazza's entrance and outdoor patio, without being obvious. I sent a quick text to Mark. In position across street. See you inside, maybe. He replied, copy that. I'm at the cafe at the corner. We'll wander in around 6:50 and sit separately. Those 20 minutes felt like an eternity. I paced the mezzanine, pretending to read framed artwork descriptions on the wall whenever a hotel staffer passed by to avoid looking suspicious. Mostly, my eyes were glued to La Piazza's door, scanning each woman who entered. At 6:40, I saw her. Jessica emerged from a rideshare car. She often took Uber to avoid downtown parking hassles, looking stunning and heartbreakingly familiar in a wine-red dress I'd bought her last Christmas. She stepped onto the sidewalk with that confident grace I knew so well. My breath caught. Even now, she took my breath away. She looked around briefly, then headed inside the restaurant. Alone. So far, her story checked out. She was at La Piazza at about the expected time. But Tina was nowhere in sight. My fist clenched involuntarily. Was Tina going to conveniently be late or cancel last minute? Or was Tina never coming because it was never Tina at all? I forced myself to wait a few more minutes. Jess hadn't come out. Presumably, she was seated at the bar or a table, waiting. The idea of her sitting there by herself made me ache. Perhaps part of me still wished a friend would show up and prove all this wrong. At 6:50, I left my perch and crossed the street. The air was crisp and I pulled my cap a bit lower. It was showtime. La Piazza's interior was warmly lit, all amber lights and rustic decor. A hostess greeted me, asking if I had a reservation. I'm meeting a friend at the bar, I murmured, and slid past toward the bar area without waiting for a response. My eyes swept the room, and then I saw her. Jessica was seated at the far end of the bar, back mostly toward me, one elegant heel dangling from her foot as she rested it on the stool's footrest. She was talking to the bartender with a polite smile as he shook a cocktail for her. There was an empty stool next to her, and two others, then an older couple occupying the end nearest me. She was alone for now. I chose a strategic position, a half wall by the entrance to the bar area, partially obscured by a decorative plant where I could see her in profile. I sat at a small, high-top table that was thankfully free and partially concealed by the planter. My heart thudded painfully. It felt surreal to be essentially spying on my own wife. Moments later, Mark entered. I saw him pause, spot me briefly, then casually take a seat at a table on the opposite side of the bar. He didn't look my way again, just pulled out his phone, playing the part of someone waiting for company. We were both in position. Now all that remained was who would join Jessica. My mouth was dry. I signaled a waiter and just ordered water, not trusting myself with alcohol right now. At 7:05, I noticed Jessica's posture change. She sat up a bit straighter, eyes focusing toward the main entrance. I followed her line of sight. A man was striding in, scanning the bar. Tall, broad-shouldered, probably early 40s. He wore a tailored suit with an open collar, no tie, exuding that casual confidence of someone used to being in charge. His hair was steel gray at the temples, giving him a distinguished look, and even from a distance I could see he was fit and carried himself with authority. I didn't recognize him at all. Definitely not anyone from our social circles. My blood ran cold. This had to be T. I caught Mark glancing discreetly, and he raised an eyebrow ever so slightly as if to say, "This the guy?" I gave a subtle nod. The man spotted Jessica and broke into a warm smile, walking over. My wife slid off the bar stool to greet him. To my seething fury, he leaned in and kissed her cheek intimately, one hand on her waist. She blushed and said something I couldn't hear over the bar's ambient clink and chatter. They sat, now side by side at the bar, close. The man rested a hand on her back momentarily as he got comfortable. Jessica twirled a lock of hair, A telltale, nervous, flirtatious gesture I'd seen her do exactly once before, on our very first date. I realized I had stopped breathing. My vision tunneled on the two of them. The way she looked at him, slightly shy, delighted, was a way she hadn't looked at me in a long time. It felt like a dagger to the heart. The bartender brought the cocktail she'd ordered and a whiskey for the man. They clinked glasses softly. I couldn't hear them, but in my mind I could feel the script. Cheers. So glad you came. You look amazing. Their body language spoke volumes. Leaning in, knees almost touching. She laughed at something he said, lightly touching his forearm. That small, familiar gesture confirmed everything. She was comfortable with him, affectionate. This wasn't their first rendezvous. I didn't notice I had crushed the paper straw wrapper from my water glass into a tight ball until it dropped to the floor. A hot rage began spreading in my chest, warring with the gutting pain. She's cheating. It's real. The image was right there. I could deny it no longer. My first instinct was to storm over and knock that smug grin off his face. My muscles tensed, white-knuckle fury coursing through me. But Mark, reading me from across the room, subtly shook his head once, a reminder. Keep cool. I closed my eyes a moment and inhaled slowly. I couldn't lose it. Not here. Not yet. I needed to document this betrayal calmly, like we planned. I took out my phone under the table. Fortunately, they were too absorbed in each other to notice me anyway, but I angled it discreetly. Zooming in a bit, I snapped a few photos. Jessica laughing with her hand on his arm, the man whispering something near her ear, the two clinking their drinks again. Each photo drove another nail into the coffin of our marriage as I knew it. When I looked up from my phone, they were getting up from the bar. My heart lurched. Were they leaving? Together? But instead of heading out the front, the hostess was guiding them to a table. Of course, they were here for dinner. They hadn't spotted me in the brief transition. I ducked slightly behind the plant. They moved to a corner booth half hidden by a decorative arch. That gave me an opening. If I repositioned myself in the dining area, I might overhear them. I glanced to Mark. He nodded subtly, as if confirming he'd stay put and cover me if needed. I left a $5 bill under my untouched water, hopefully enough to not anger the waiter for taking the table so briefly, and quietly moved from the bar into the main dining area. La Piazza's layout had a few nooks, one of which now held the adulterous couple. I carefully chose a table diagonally behind their booth, about 2 tables away. A large fern provided partial cover, but I could see them and faintly hear their voices over the ambient music and clink of silverware. A waitress approached me with a menu. To blend in, I ordered an appetizer, bruschetta, claiming I was waiting for another person to join me. That would buy me time without raising suspicion. Now, with a clearer view, I studied the man. He was handsome in a seasoned way, the kind of presence that likely turned heads at a country club or boardroom. Jessica looked almost girlish across from him, chin propped on her hand as she listened intently to his story about something. I caught fragments. Quarterly numbers were dismal, I had to take charge. She responded with admiring eyes. Who was this guy? A client from her marketing firm? A wealthy business owner, perhaps? It would explain the suit and his confident demeanor. He was certainly older than our 33 years. I'd peg him around mid-40s. The familiarity and ease between them suggested this wasn't brand new. How long had this been going on? Questions swirled in my head, feeding the fire of betrayal. As I eavesdropped, a clearer snippet of their conversation drifted by. Jessica. I know, I was surprised too. But after last weekend, I've been thinking about, what we talked about. Man, smiling. Oh, have you made a decision? They leaned closer. I held my breath. Jessica lowered her voice, but I managed to catch it. I can't keep living a double life, Tom. I want to be with you openly, but I need to handle it carefully. I don't want to nuke Dan's life out of nowhere. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. The blood in my veins turned to ice even as my face burned. She was talking about me, and about leaving me. For him. And Tom. Now I had a name to the face of the man who stole my wife. Tom reached across and took her hand gently. I saw red, but forced myself to stay rooted. Jess, I don't want to push, but I meant what I said. I love you. I want you with me, and I promise you, I'll take care of you. You won't have to worry about anything. His voice was low, earnest. We can start our life together whenever you're ready. My lawyer can draw up whatever papers you need or hire you the best attorney. I just want you free of what's holding you back. What's holding you back? That's what I was now. An obstacle to be removed so they could live happily. My hands shook under the table. That smug son of a... Breathe, Dan, breathe. Jessica bit her lip, a gesture I recognized as conflicted. It's just... Daniel's a good man. This will destroy him. I feel like such a horrible person. Her eyes glistened as if tears were near. But I can't lie to myself anymore. I love you too, and I haven't loved him, not the way a wife should for a while. Her voice cracked on that last admission. I gripped the edge of my seat so hard I thought the wood would splinter. Hearing her say she didn't love me, in past tense, it was unbearable. A wave of grief surged, almost drowning out my anger. Our life, our years together. Had they been a lie for a while now? All those nights I thought she was just tired or stressed. She had already replaced me in her heart with this man sitting across from her. Tom squeezed her hand. Hey, you're not horrible. You're following your heart. Daniel will survive. He's a grown man. These things happen. He shrugged as if my impending heartbreak was a minor inconvenience. We'll make sure he's taken care of fairly. I told you, I'll personally fund whatever settlement if you need me to, just to speed things up. I nearly choked on the bile rising in my throat. This man thought he could buy off the damage. Just throw money at the husband to make him go away quietly. Jessica laughed weakly. I doubt he'd accept your money. That might be a bit insulting. Tom smirked. True. Well, either way, money won't be an issue for us. Once you're with me, you'll want for nothing. My waitress appeared with the bruschetta and a wine I didn't even remember ordering. I nodded thanks, hoping she wouldn't notice the thunderous expression I was sure was on my face. I couldn't eat a bite, but I sipped the wine to wet my dry mouth, never taking my eyes off the pair. I snapped a few more photos discreetly, capturing them holding hands across the table. Her tearful but adoring gaze, his reassuring smile. Evidence. Cold, hard evidence, even though the sight was hot agony for me. They continued talking, now shifting away from me. I heard something about the trip in December and that beach house in Hilton Head. So, they had future plans. He was promising her a new life of luxury, it seemed, and she was going to drop the bomb on me soon. How considerate that she wanted to handle it carefully to not nuke my life, as if anything could soften that blow. I realized I was witnessing not just an affair, but the prelude to my own blindsiding. If I hadn't discovered this now, she might have waited weeks or months and then served me divorce papers out of nowhere, possibly once Tom's lawyer set it up. They might have planned to blindside me in a way most advantageous to them, maybe catch me off guard so I'd sign something. Who knows? My hurt began crystallizing into something else. Cold determination. They thought they had a plan. They thought I was just a good man who'd be quietly destroyed and disposed of. Not if I could help it. A growing part of me now wanted more than anything to upend their little fantasy, to make them both pay for the hell they were about to put me through. But first, I had to get out of here without being detected. They hadn't noticed me so far, too engrossed in each other. Their entrees arrived. Neither seemed to have much appetite beyond a few bites between gazing and touching hands. I'd seen enough. Staying any longer risked me losing control or them noticing. I signaled the waitress, paid the check for the untouched food, and slipped away from my table when their heads were close together in murmured conversation. I made it out of La Piazza without a glance from either of them. Out on the sidewalk, I gulped the cool night air. I was shaking, with rage, with devastation, with adrenaline. Across the street, leaning against the hotel wall, I saw Mark step out. His face was grim. He must have also moved to observe or at least trust my judgment based on the photos I'd surely share. We locked eyes, and he nodded once, a silent question. Got it? I nodded back. I got it. Proof. And a heart full of wrath. I texted him swiftly. I need to get out of here. Meet at my place in 20. He replied, on my way. He'd leave separately to avoid drawing any link if they looked outside. I hurried to my car and drove off, not looking back. As I drove, tears finally brimmed, now that I was safely alone. I pounded the steering wheel at a red light, a strangled cry escaping my throat. The pain was immense. The woman I loved was in love with someone else and planning to leave me. But underneath the sorrow, anger pulsed stronger. She and her lover had made plans to treat me like an obstacle. They were going to handle me. The humiliation of it burned. By the time I pulled into my driveway, the tears had dried, replaced by a cold focus. If they wanted a careful plan, I would have one of my own. Jessica wasn't home yet, likely still basking in Tom's attention or perhaps headed to a hotel with him. Who knows? The thought made me sick, but I pushed it away. One nightmare at a time. Mark's car rolled up moments after I got inside. I let him in wordlessly. In the foyer light, he looked at me with a mixture of sympathy and anger. "Dan, I'm so sorry, man," he said quietly. I swallowed the lump in my throat. "Thanks, but save it. I can't fall apart right now. I need your help." My voice sounded hollow but resolute. He nodded firmly. "Whatever you need." We moved to the kitchen, and I poured us both a stiff whiskey. We sat at the table. For a moment, I couldn't speak. I just stared at the liquid in my glass as if the answers lay in its amber depths. Finally, I said in an eerily calm tone, "She's planning to leave me for him. Soon. They think I don't know. They think I'll just roll over." I met Mark's eyes. They're wrong." A fierce light entered Mark's eyes. "Damn right they are." I pulled out my phone and shared the photos I took with him. As he scrolled through, each image was a fresh cut, but also fuel for the fire. "This is everything I need to prove adultery," I said. "North Carolina allows fault divorce. She won't get a penny of alimony if I prove this. And I can sue that bastard for alienation of affection, possibly. Might not win much if he ties it up legally, but the scandal alone—" I was almost rambling, voice shaking with adrenaline. Mark put a steadying hand on my shoulder. "Slow down, Dan. One step at a time. We need a plan." I took a breath and gulped a bit of whiskey. Plan, yes. My mind raced with possibilities. First, I gather all evidence, photos, maybe hire a PI to get more if needed. Then, secure my finances. She doesn't know I know, so I have a head start. I can move money out of our joint account tomorrow morning discreetly. At least half, my half. Freeze credit cards or remove her as authorized user on mine. Make sure she can't run off with anything big when this blows up. Mark nodded, following. "You should also get a good lawyer, immediately. One who knows how to play hardball." "Yeah," I agreed. "Maybe you know someone? Or I can research tonight." He scratched his chin. "I might. Let me think, but definitely by Monday you need representation. Actually, screw Monday. Tomorrow is Saturday, but I have a friend from college who's a family law attorney in Raleigh. She might take your call even on a weekend as a favor." I felt a wave of gratitude. "Please reach out." We started making a list, writing it down on a notepad. Hire divorce attorney specializing in NC fault cases. Gather evidence of affair, photos, PI, text logs if possible. Financial prep, separate accounts, secure assets. Plan serving divorce papers unexpectedly. Timing? Alienation of affection. Lawsuit versus Tom. Expose affair to maximum effect, but how when? Loop in any necessary allies, friends with useful skills. As we jotted points, a dark clarity settled over me. I was going to wage war against this betrayal, legally, financially, socially. She had made her choice, now I would make mine. No reconciliation, no mercy. Mark tapped the pen. Also, what about her job? That guy, do we know who he is? Could be her boss. If so, that's a huge ethics violation. They might both be in deep at work if this comes out. I thought back. She never mentioned a Tom at her firm, but maybe a client? Or a senior partner? Not sure, but I can find out. She left her laptop bag by the foyer. I realized with her preoccupied state, maybe she wouldn't be careful with things. If I could find an email or something. I went quietly to the foyer. Her work bag was indeed there. I rifled through quickly, mostly files and her tablet. I unlocked the tablet. She'd given me her passcode ages ago for emergencies and hadn't changed it. A quick search of emails for Tom yielded one in her inbox from Thomas G. Whitaker, regarding Whitaker Resorts. Marketing strategy meeting. Dated a couple months back. Ah, Whitaker Resorts, a chain of luxury resorts. And this Thomas Whitaker must be an executive or owner. That rings a bell. I showed Mark. He whistled softly. Whitaker Resorts. Yeah, I think he's the CEO. I've seen a billboard with his face near the airport. That guy is loaded, Dan. Loaded? Of course, offering her a life of no worries. The bile rose again. But this was a valuable piece of intel. He wasn't her boss. He was a client. A very high-profile one at that. If their affair came out, it could risk her job for unprofessional conduct, and his company might not be pleased either. Or maybe he's the big boss and doesn't care. But negative publicity for him, possibly. I also saw a calendar invite on her tablet for weekend meeting WR Project Hilton Head. That lined up with their talk of a trip. So the work trip she took 2 weekends ago to consult on-site for Whitaker Resorts was likely a romantic getaway with him. I clenched my jaw. More evidence. I took pictures of the screen with my phone. Returning to the kitchen, I relayed this to Mark. He's a client. Married or not, he's high profile. If I sue him or expose this, it'll hit the news possibly. Mark considered. Alienation of affection suits can go public easily. Local news loves that stuff if the damages are big. And a CEO adulterer? Juicy story. I stared at the list we made. A ruthless campaign, that's what I intended. They wanted to destroy me quietly. I would destroy them loudly. But I also realized I needed more than just me and Mark. I might need help from others too, I said slowly. Trusted friends with certain skills. Mark nodded. Name it. We can bring in whoever you trust. I immediately thought of 2 people. Sam, my college buddy who now was a cybersecurity expert, and Angela, a lawyer friend of Mark's, maybe the one he mentioned. Perhaps it also Alicia, a mutual friend who worked in local media if we wanted press leaks. I wasn't as close to Alicia, but she was in our social circle, always hungry for a scoop at the TV station she worked at. Would she run a story on this? Possibly, if framed right, though she'd be conflicted since she knows Jess too, but maybe some anonymous tip to her station. It was overwhelming, plotting someone's ruin, especially someone I had loved deeply just days ago. But every time a pang of doubt or sorrow hit, I recalled her words in the restaurant. I haven't loved him the way a wife should in a long time, and he'll survive, he's a grown man. They had discarded me. So I would discard any mercy for them. Just then, headlights swept into the driveway. My heart thumped. Jessica was home. I glanced at the time, 9:30 p.m. She was home earlier than I expected, perhaps to keep up appearances. Mark and I exchanged looks. Think she'll suspect anything? He asked under his breath. I inhaled. No, I'll act normal. You should go, though, just in case. She might wonder why we're meeting late. He agreed. Text me later. And stay strong, buddy. We'll get them. He squeezed my shoulder. Mark slipped out the back door just as Jess came in the front. I heard her call. Dan? You still up? I quickly shuffled our notes into a drawer and went to greet her in the hallway, hoping my face didn't give away the storm inside. There you are, I said, smiling as naturally as I could manage. How was dinner with Tina? The lie tasted bitter on my tongue. She set down her purse. She looked a little tired, but there was a glow beneath, the look of someone who had a good evening. It made me sick. It was nice, she said easily. We had a lot of catching up to do. She stepped forward and, to my astonishment, wrapped her arms around me in a hug. A perfunctory hug, but still. Thank you for understanding. I really needed a girls' night. I stood stiff in her embrace, hoping she wouldn't feel my pounding heart. Of course, I murmured, patting her back. Glad you had fun. She pulled back and peered at me. You smell like whiskey. Were you drinking? I chuckled in what I hoped was a carefree way. Yeah, Mark came by earlier. We had a couple drinks while watching the game. He just left. She seemed to accept that, yawning. Ah. That explains it. She headed toward the stairs, then paused. I'm beat. I think I'll shower and turn in. Go ahead, I'll lock up. As she ascended, a wave of emotion nearly knocked me over. I felt relieved, relieved that I could still pretend for now, and that she was utterly unaware. In a dark way, I had the advantage of surprise. I intended to use it fully. After cleaning up any evidence of our planning session in the kitchen, I went upstairs. The shower was running in the master bath. I sat on the edge of the bed, head in my hands. I had never felt so angry, hurt, and alive all at once. This secret knowledge was like a live wire in my veins. She emerged in pajamas a short while later. I had already changed and gotten under the covers, turned on my side away so she wouldn't see any betrayal of emotion on my face. She slid into bed, not cuddling or touching me. Of course not. She hadn't in a while. I now knew why. In the dark silence, I felt her sigh once. Was it contentment from her evening or guilt-laden regret? I had no idea. Part of me wanted to interrogate her right then. How was La Piazza? Did you enjoy his kisses? But I bit my tongue so hard I nearly drew blood. Not yet. Within minutes, her breathing slowed into the rhythm of sleep. I lay awake, eyes open, mind racing with the blueprint of revenge. Tonight was the end of my blissful ignorance. Tomorrow would be the beginning of her and Tom's nightmare. They just didn't know it yet. And I would make absolutely certain that when I was done, neither of them would have the life they envisioned. They wanted to burn my world to the ground for their happiness. I would return the favor with interest. As Friday bled into the early hours of Saturday, I finally allowed myself a whisper in the darkness. It's war, then. The sleeping form beside me shifted but didn't wake. Yes, it was war, and I intended to win decisively. The end. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed it, so subscribe to my channel and watch the next video.